A Report to an Academy, written by Franz Kafka in 1917. This English adaptation, translated by Michael Edward Troy. Esteemed gentlemen of the Academy, you have done me the honor of inviting me to provide the Academy with an account in regard to my previous life as an ape. In that sense, I unfortunately cannot comply with your request. Almost 5 years now separate me from my existence as an ape. A short time perhaps when measured by the calendar, but infinitely long to have galloped through, as I have done at times, accompanied by admirable people, good advice, applause, and orchestral music, but ultimately alone. Since all those accompanying me kept their distance a long way from the barrier in order to preserve the image. This achievement would have been impossible if I had stubbornly clung to my origin, on to the memories of my youth. Giving up that obstinacy was, in fact, the cardinal rule that I imposed upon myself. I, a free ape, surrendered myself to this yoke. Thereby, however, my memories have increasingly closed themselves off against me. At first, if people had allowed it, the entire gateway that the sky spans over the earth would have been available to me for my journey back. But as my development spurred onwards, the gate grew increasingly lower and narrower. I grew more comfortable and more enclosed in the human world. The storm of the past that blew after me eased. Today it is only a gentle breeze that cools my heels. And the distant hole through which it comes and through which I once came has become so small that even if I had the strength and will to run back there, I would have to scrape the fur off my body to get through. Quite honestly, as much as I like choosing images for these things, speaking frankly, your experience as apes, gentlemen, insofar as you have something of that kind that lies behind you, cannot be more distant from you than mine is from me. Everyone walking here on earth feels a tickling at the heels, the small chimpanzee as well as the great Achilles. In a limited sense, however, I can perhaps answer your question, and indeed I do so with great pleasure. The first thing I learned was to give a handshake. The handshake displays candor. Today, standing at the pinnacle of my career, may I add to that first handshake also my candid words. For the Academy, it will not impart anything fundamentally new and will fall far short of what has been asked of me, and for the life of me I cannot speak about. But nonetheless, it should demonstrate the standard that a particular ape followed upon his intrusion into the human world, and in which he entrenched himself. Yet, I would certainly not allow myself to put into words the insignificant facts that follow were I not entirely sure of myself, and if my position on all the great vaudeville stages of the civilized world had not become unassailable. I originate from the Gold Coast. For the story of how I was captured, I must rely on the reports of others. A hunting expedition from the firm of Hagenbeck. Incidentally, since then I have emptied a number of bottles of good red wine with the leader of that expedition, lay hidden in the bushes by the shore on a hunting blind, as I ran down in the evening in the middle of a band of apes to a trough. Shots were fired. I was the only one to be hit by 2 bullets. One in the cheek. That was superficial, but it left a large hairless red scar which earned me the name Red Peter. A disgusting name, completely inappropriate, literally something invented by an ape, as if the only difference between me and the recently deceased trained ape Peter, known here and there, with the red patch on my cheek. I only mention this as a sideline. The second shot hit me below the hip. It was a severe wound. It's the reason that today I still limp a little. Recently, I read an article by one of the 10,000 windbags who vent their opinions about me in the newspapers that my ape nature is not yet entirely under control. The proof being that when visitors come, I have a predilection for pulling down my trousers to show them where this shot entered. That fellow should have each finger of his writing hand shot off one by one. As for me, I can pull my trousers down in front of anyone if I like. You will find nothing there other than well cared for fur. And the scar from, let me choose a particular word for a specific purpose, something to avoid any misunderstanding. The scar from a wayward shot. Everything is perfectly open. There is nothing to hide. When it comes to a question of the truth, every great mind discards even the most exquisite manners. On the other hand, if that writer were to pull down his trousers before a visitor, that would be a different story. And I'll take it as a sign of rationality that he does not do it. But then he should not bother me with his sensibilities. After those shots, I woke up, and here my own memory gradually begins. I was in a cage between decks on the Hagenbeck steamship. It was not a four-sided cage with bars, only 3 walls fixed to a crate so that the container constituted the 4th wall. The whole thing was too low to stand upright and too narrow for sitting down. So I squatted with bent knees that trembled all the time. And, as at first, I probably did not wish to see anyone and wanted to remain constantly in the darkness. I turned towards the crate while the bars of the cage cut into the flesh on my back. Such a method of confining wild animals appears to be befitting at first, and today I cannot deny, based on my experience, that, in a human sense, it is in fact the case. At the time, I didn't think much about it. For the first time in my life, I was without a way out. At least there was no direct way out. Right in front of me was the crate, its boards affixed closely together. There was a gap running directly between the boards that when I first discovered it, I greeted it with a blissful howl of ignorance. But this hole was not nearly big enough to stick my tail through, and not even all the strength of an ape could make it any wider. According to what I was told later, I am supposed to have made abnormally little noise. Thereby it was assumed that either I die soon, or, if I succeeded in surviving the first critical period, I would be very capable of being trained. I survived this period, muffled sobbing, painful flea searching, apathetically licking a coconut, banging my skull against the wall of the crate, sticking out my tongue when anyone came near me. These were the first pursuits in my new life. Throughout it all, there was but one overriding feeling: no way out. Nowadays, of course, I can portray these ape-like feelings only in human terms, and as a result, I misrepresent them. But even if I can no longer realize the old truth of the ape, at least it is in line with what I have described. Of that there is no doubt. Hitherto, I had so many ways out, and now I no longer had one. I was trapped. If they had nailed me down, my freedom of movement would not have been any less. And why? Even if you scratch raw the flesh between your toes, you won't find the reason. If you press your back against one of the bars of the cage until it almost slices you in two, you won't find the reason. I had no way out. But I had to come up with one for myself. Without it, I could not live. Always facing that crate wall, I would inevitably have died a miserable death. But according to Hagenbeck, apes belong at the crate wall. Well then, I simply stopped being an ape. A clear and pleasant thought process, which I somehow must have concocted with my gut, since apes think with their gut. I fear that people do not quite understand what I mean by a way out. I use the expression in its most common and fullest sense. I am deliberately not saying freedom. I do not mean this great feeling of freedom all around me. As an ape, I perhaps recognized it, and I have met human beings who yearn for it. As far as I am concerned, I did not demand freedom either then or today. Incidentally, human beings are all too often deceived by the sense of freedom. And since freedom is considered to be among the most sublime feelings, the corresponding deception of it is also among the most sublime. In the variety shows before my appearance, I have often watched a pair of artists performing on trapezes high up along the ceiling. They swung themselves, they rocked back and forth, they jumped, they glided into each other's arms. One hung by the hair, the other held with his teeth. That, too, is human freedom, I thought. Self-controlled movement. What a mockery of sacred nature! No structure would withstand the laughter of the apes at such a sight. No, I didn't want freedom, only a way out, right or left, wherever. I made no other demands, even if the way out would prove to be only an illusion. The demand was small. The deception could not be any greater. Continue on, continue on. Not just to stand still with arms raised, pressed against a great wall. Today, I see clearly that without the greatest inner calm, I would never have been able to escape. And, in fact, I probably owe everything that I have become to the calmness that engulfed me after the first days there on the ship. And, in turn, I probably owe that calmness to the people on the ship. They are good people, in spite of everything. Today I still fondly remember the clang of their heavy steps, which in those days resounded in my half-sleep. They had the habit of tackling everything extremely slowly. If one of them wanted to rub his eyes, he raised his hand as if it were a heavy barbell. Their jokes were coarse but hearty. Their laughter was always mixed with a dangerous-sounding but harmless gruff cough. They always had something in their mouths to spit out, and they didn't care where they spat. They always complained that my fleas sprung over onto them, but they were never seriously angry with me because of it, for they knew that fleas thrived in my fur and that fleas are jumpers. That's just the way it was. When they were off duty, sometimes a few of them sat down in a semicircle around me. They hardly spoke, only grunting to each other while smoking their pipes stretched out on the crates. They slapped their knees as soon as I made the slightest movement, and from time to time one of them would pick up a stick and tickle me where I liked it. If I were invited today to make a journey on that ship, I would undoubtedly decline the invitation. But it's equally certain that the memories I could dwell upon there between its decks would not only be dreadful. The calmness that I acquired in this circle of people above all dissuaded me from any attempt to escape. From today's perspective, it seems to me as if I had at least sensed that I had to find a way out if I wanted to live, but that escaping would not be the way out. I can't remember if escape was really possible, but I believe it was. For an ape, flight should always be possible, too. With my teeth being what they are today, I have to be careful even when simply cracking nuts. But back then, I must have been able, over time, to succeed in chewing through the lock on the door. I didn't do that. What would I have gained? As soon as I would have struck my head out, I would have been captured again and locked up in an even worse cage. Or I could have slipped unnoticed among the other animals, say, for instance, the boas opposite me, and breathed my last in their embraces. Or I could have managed to steal away up to the deck and jump overboard, tossing back and forth on the ocean for a little while until I drowned. Acts of desperation. I did not think things through in such a rational manner, but under the influence of my surroundings, I behaved as if I had considered it all. I did not think things through, but I did observe very calmly. I saw these people going back and forth, always the same faces, the same movements. Often it seemed to me as if there was only one person. So this person or these people walked about unimpeded. A lofty objective dawned on me. No one promised me that if I became like them, the bars of the cage would be removed. Such promises, apparently impossible to fulfill, are not given. But if one fulfills the promises, then later the promises appear precisely there where one had looked in vain for them earlier. Now, these people in themselves were nothing that beguiled me very much. If I had been a devotee of that aforementioned freedom, I would certainly have preferred the ocean to the way out displayed in the dull gaze of these people. In any case, I observed them for a long time before I even thought about such things. In fact, only the accumulated observations urged me on in a specific direction. It was so easy to imitate these people. I learned to spit in the very first days. We then spit in each other's faces. The only difference was that I licked my face clean afterward. They did not. Soon I was smoking a pipe like an old sea dog, and if I then also pressed my thumb down into the bowl of the pipe, a loud cheer erupted between the decks. Only, for a long time, I did not understand the difference between an empty and a full pipe. I had the greatest difficulty with the schnapps bottle. The smell disgusted me. I forced myself to it with all my power, but it took weeks before I could overcome my repulsion. Curiously enough, the people took this inner struggle more seriously than anything else about me. In my memories, I don't distinguish between the people. However, there was one who came back again and again, either alone or with comrades, day and night, at all hours. He would stand with the bottle in front of me and give me instructions. He did not understand me. He wanted to solve the mystery of my being. He would uncork the bottle slowly and then look at me to verify that I had understood. I confess that I always looked at him with a wild, over-eager attentiveness. Such a student of humankind no human teacher will ever find on earth. After uncorking the bottle, he'd raise it to his mouth. My gaze followed him right into his throat. He would nod, pleased with me, and set the bottle to his lips. Delighted with my gradual enlightenment, I'd squeal and scratch myself vigorously everywhere and anywhere. He was happy. He'd tilt the bottle to his mouth and take a swig. Impatient and desperate to emulate him, I befouled myself in my cage, which again gave him great satisfaction. Then, holding the bottle at arm's length and bringing it up once more with a swing, he'd guzzle it down in one fell swoop, didactically bending backward in an exaggerated manner. Exhausted by so much effort, I could no longer follow and clung limply onto the bars, while he ended the theoretical lesson by rubbing his belly and grinning. Only now the practical exercises begin. Am I not already too exhausted by the theoretical? Indeed, far too weary. That's my fate. Nevertheless, I'd grab the proffered bottle as well as I could, uncork it trembling. Once again accomplishing that, new energies gradually set in. I lift the bottle, there being hardly any notable difference from the original, put it to my lips, and throw it in disgust, although it was empty and filled only with the smell, toss it with disgust onto the floor. To the sorrow of my teacher, to my even greater sorrow, neither he nor I being consoled when, after throwing away the bottle, I do not forget to give my belly a fine rub and to grin as I do so. All too often, that's how the lesson transpired. And, to my teacher's credit, he was not angry with me. Well, sometimes he held his hot pipe against my fur in some place or other that I had difficulty reaching until it began to smolder, but then he would extinguish it himself with his huge good hand. He wasn't angry with me. He realized that we were fighting on the same side against ape nature, and that I had the more difficult part. What a triumph indeed for him and for me when one evening, in front of a large circle of onlookers, perhaps it was a festivity, a gramophone was playing, an officer wandered out among the people, when on this evening, as no one was looking, I grabbed a bottle of schnapps, which had been inadvertently left standing in front of my cage. Amid the rising attention of the group, I uncorked it, just as I had been taught, placed it on my mouth, and, without hesitation, not even a grimace, like a drinker by trade, eyes rolling around, throat sloshing, I really and truly drank it empty, and then threw it away, no longer in despair, but like an artist. Although I did forget to stroke my belly, but instead, because I couldn't help myself, because I had to, because of an uncontrollable urge, my senses roaring, I cried out a short and clear, "Hello!" breaking out into a human sound. And with this outburst, I jumped into the human community, and I felt its echo. "Listen, he's talking!" like a kiss on my entire sweat-soaked body. I'll say it again. Imitating human beings was not something that enticed me. I imitated them because I was looking for a way out, for no other reason. And even that triumph achieved little. My voice immediately failed me again. It only returned months later. My distaste for the schnapps bottle became even stronger. My path, however, was given once and for all. When I was handed over to my first trainer in Hamburg, I soon realized the two possibilities open to me: the zoological garden or vaudeville. I did not hesitate. I said to myself, do whatever it takes to get into vaudeville. That is the way out. The zoological garden is only a new cage. Once in it, you're lost. And I learned my lessons, gentlemen. Alas, one learns when one has to. One learns when one wants a way out. One learns ruthlessly. One supervises oneself with a whip and tears oneself apart at the slightest resistance. My ape nature careened about, rolling out of me and away, so that in the process, my first teacher himself almost becoming an ape, soon having to give up training and taken away to a mental institution. Fortunately, he was quickly discharged again. But I went through many teachers, indeed even several teachers at once, as I became even more confident of my abilities, as the general public followed my progress and my future began to brighten. I engaged teachers for myself, set them down in 5 interconnected rooms, and simultaneously studied with them all by continually leaping from one room into another. And such progress, the rays of knowledge penetrated my awakening brain from all sides. I don't deny it. It was exhilarating. But I also confess that I did not overvalue it, not at the time, even less today. With an effort that up to now has never been replicated on earth, I managed to obtain the average education of a European. Perhaps that in itself would not amount to much, but it is something insofar as it helped me out of the cage and created this particular way out for me, the human way out. There's a wonderful German saying, to disappear into the bushes. That I have done. I've disappeared into the bushes. There was no other path, always taking into account that freedom was not a choice. If I look back on my evolution and its objectives up to this point, I do not lament, nor am I content. Hands in my trouser pockets, the bottle of wine on the table, I half lie and I half sit in my rocking chair and gaze out the window. If I have a visitor, I welcome him with propriety. My impresario sits in the foyer. If I ring, he comes and listens to what I have to say. In the evening, there is almost always a performance, and I could hardly be more successful. When I come home late at night from banquets, from scientific receptions, or pleasant get-togethers, a small, half-trained female chimpanzee is waiting for me, and I take my pleasure with her the way apes do. During the day, I don't want to see her, for her gaze reflects the madness of a bewildered trained animal. I'm the only one who recognizes it, and I cannot bear it. On the whole, at any rate, I've achieved what I set out to achieve. One shouldn't say it was not worth the effort. In any case, I don't want to be judged by humans. I only want to disseminate awareness. I am merely chronicling, even to you, esteemed gentlemen of the Academy, I have only given an account.